Hey everybody, my name is Jacob Snow, and I'm here today to tell you about the Battle of Bull Run. First named engagement of the Civil War. It would take place on July 21st of 1861. The war had not been going on for very long, and it would see the wills of the Union and the wills of the Confederacy clash. And with an outcome that the Union was not expecting in the slightest. So the generals at play here are Irwin McDowell, who is the Union general, and you will see Pierre Gustave Toutant Beauregard, or PGT Beauregard, and Joseph Johnston for the Confederate side. Both had a close number of forces, somewhere in the area of 30,000. A little less than 30,000 for the Confederacy, and a little over 30,000 for the Union. And all of the troops involved in this battle, is very important to point out, except for officers, were horrendously inexperienced and underqualified for the type of engagement they were being expected to perform in. Just awful. To me, as a military historian, it's one of my favorite battles, even though as a military tactician, someone who studies strategy and things like that, the Battle of Bull Run should never have happened. It was a classic example of legislative and command differences creating a situation in which battle is joined when it shouldn't be. Irwin McDowell, however, did not just go, well, I was told to, take these inexperienced men into a death trap. What the heck, it might be fun. No, he actually did go to Lincoln about this and told Lincoln the men were too inexperienced to effectively join battle and crush the opposition as Lincoln was expecting of them. Lincoln's response was, well, yeah, your men are inexperienced. The enemies are too. Now go forth and conquer. McDowell did not want to do this, but he had his orders and he intended to follow them. So anyhow, Beauregard had one, not Beauregard, McDowell. McDowell had one hope, okay? The forces were present at Bull Run, which is located very close to Manassas. It's named Bull Run because of a river that runs close by, the Bull Run River. PGT Beauregard was currently positioned near there, and he only had around 20,000 troops, which means that he had a little bit less, I think 18,000 troops, but that's still substantially lower. That's 12,000 men less than the Union was trying to bring to bear at the location. And McDowell wanted to take advantage of this numerical discrepancy. So he tried to get his troops to Bull Run before the 10,000 men under Joseph Johnston could join the battle, because they were currently engaged, kind of dodging around Beauregard's compatriot, not Beauregard, McDowell's compatriot, Robert Patterson, who was chasing Johnston around, trying to keep him away from Bull Run so the Confederate force would be divided and more easily dealt with. Technology-wise, at Bull Run, the Union had a slight advantage in that they had more recent cannons, but the Confederacy actually had more cannons present. They just weren't as recent or as accurate as Union guns, primarily because many of the Union cannons had rifling, which would allow the cannonballs to go farther and be more accurate. Firearms-wise, both armies were very similar, and troops-wise, fortunately for McDowell, troops on all sides of the fence were very inexperienced. It didn't matter which side of the war you were on, you had no clue what you were doing unless you were either an officer or a general, someone in the position of command, because some of them had fought in the Spanish-American War, Mexican-American War. Bull Run would take place, and there are two armies present, but there is a third group that cannot be ignored. And this is a excessively large group of Union civilians, northern people who came to watch the boys in blue trounce those rebel rabble-rousers and bring the war to a speedy end. They brought picnic baskets, they brought wagons, and they have decided they were just going to set up shop, watch the whole thing play out from a hillside nearby. Johnston is able to get away from Patterson and join with Beauregard, bringing the troops to around equal levels. It's here that inexperience really starts to rear its head, okay? Troop uniforms had not even really been fully made and implemented yet, so as the battle is joined, there's a lot of confusion as to who works for who. You would have men roving around the battlefield, and you would have officers looking at these men and going, are these our guys or are these their guys? No one knew who was fighting for whom except for each unit itself. And this led to a lot of violence that would have been avoided and or amplified if the people in question had known who was working for whom. Artillery was heavily used in this battle, albeit not with the utmost efficiency. Pardon me. And there were many troops, many casualties, a lot of violence. It was an ugly battle. But the lack of definite uniforms creates what is arguably the greatest rout in the history of the Civil War. In a patch of woods known as the Thicket, a group of Confederate soldiers are pinned down by artillery. And the artillerymen see a group of soldiers approaching. Assuming them to be allies, they don't just turn the guns and melt them. And this allows these troops to get close enough, and by the time the commander of this particular artillery battery, an officer by the last name of Griffin, notices that these troops are close, he goes, "They're rebels!" And at that exact moment, muskets come up and fire is poured into this artillery battery. They are knocked off the hill that they had been holding on to and fly face first into their own army. This starts a panic, and as panic spreads, it spreads explosively, and suddenly the entire Union Army is fleeing for its dear life from Confederate forces. Complicating things and making them so much worse for the Union is that horde of spectators we mentioned earlier. These spectators realize the battle is not quite going the way it was meant to and see that it's coming their way. And they all start to run, which clogs the Union's evacuation route across the Bull Run River. Suddenly, the pontoons that were intended for the men, the bridges and things, are clogged with civilians, civilian wagons, people who had brought a whole bunch of people for a picnic, and they're just running and panicking and screaming, making what's already a disorganized withdrawal even more disorganized. The Union is routed. Northern morale is crushed beyond all recognition. The Union almost doesn't come back from this. It isn't until much later in the war that you'll see Union morale start to take an upswing, and you'll start to see them playing a different game later on in the war. For me, in my opinion, the Battle of Bull Run is the only certifiable victory that can be claimed by either side, and even then, it's a stretch. The Confederacy still lost around 8,000 men of the 30,000 of the 28,000 present to either injury or death, and the Union lost a little bit less than the Confederacy did, but still an impressive number. Can you call anything like that a victory for either side when so many lives are lost? I personally don't think so. But, firstly, the Union was driven from the field, so that, as a term for victory, is met. Secondly, Union morale was destroyed. It was obliterated. The Union lost all hope of the war ending quickly. And despair began to set in the public, which would affect Confederate policy because they realized that if they could crush Union morale enough, they could drive people to force Lincoln's hand to end the war early in their favor. So that was also a victorious objective. I still don't feel that as a battle it was optimal. But you can say it was a Confederate win with a straight face without going, yeah, they won, but they lost half their army. Yay. No. Like you could with every other Civil War battle, which I feel none of them were really wins, verifiable wins. Except for the Battle of Bull Run, which is one of the reasons I love studying it. Every time I go to study it, I discover something new. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I will keep researching and I'll keep looking into these things and keep growing as a historian. I hope you all find a subject that you love, and I hope you keep digging and keep researching and keep finding new things to wonder at. God bless y'all and have a great week.